Welcome to the Soulful CXO. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Wynn. Please take a moment and subscribe, and share the show. Today, we are pleased to have with us Scott Montgomery, the Chief Customer Officer at Worldgate. Scott's experiences and insights into leadership, client relations, and personal growth promise to deliver invaluable lessons for anyone striving for success and fulfillment. Scott's career journey is detailed in his book, How Did You Get Here? It unveils transformational strategies for achieving peak performance and maintaining meaningful relationships. With his extensive expertise in overseeing Worldgate's operations, his focus on strategic alliances, including with Ultimate Kronos Group, he offers a unique perspective on integrating systems and driving success. Listen now how Scott's leadership and personal development approach can inspire and impact your path to success. Scott, it's so great to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate you having me.
You have a really interesting career journey. Can you walk us through a little bit on that and then how that got you to becoming this transformational leader that you are today?
Yeah, thank you. I am so fortunate to have been running Worldgate LLC, founded in 2002 by my wife and I for about, 22 years now. We primarily focus on school districts and public sector clients and implement their mission critical systems on the business side of IT. So we're not really related with the education side as much as we are the business side. And we've been doing this now successfully with many customers that we would say we've had for over 10 or 15 years. I was in corporate America. I worked at Verizon for 12 years in my earlier years, and I was on the fast track there. I got promoted several times, and I learned a lot about how to be a manager and how to interact with folks, and took that experience to the street and said, you know what, I think I want to own my own company. I also had 3 children and went, how am I going to afford them on a middle manager's salary? So it was time to get off the pot. And it turned out really well for us. And I think in the journey of doing that, I became a certified leadership coach. I've been coached by the same coach for 12 years. I've had the same people standing by my side. And I think one of the reasons I wrote this book is to kind of honor those relationships and talk about the finite pieces of being human in business. I don't come out of the womb ready to rocket to go. I'm not the guy that's the best business guy in the world. I learned and appreciated the support I had from others. And I learned how to finite some skills that I talk about in my book that I think others can benefit from as they go through the journey of their career.
What did that look like? Because a lot of times people are really scared to take that step, to step out of the known into the unknown, even though that unknown is really maybe what their purpose is really here on this planet in this life.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that because I think for me, what comes up when you say that, I was very strategic. I didn't throw chance to the wind. I started inquiring about being self-employed and going on my own trajectory after I had vetted out opportunities I thought could come to fruition. I wasn't a guy who just said, you know what, I think I'm going to open a business and I hope people will buy. I had a base of people that said, when you're ready to go, we will hire you. We will bring you on board. And so when I was at my earlier days at Verizon, I was faced with an opportunity to take a severance package that was going to pay me an extensive amount of time to figure out how to start my business. I was courted and worked with people that I worked at Verizon as they went into different careers, and I was able to then consult with them as my own. And I think it was really important to recognize that too, my wife was at home and stable. And if I had screwed this up and had to go back, I had that insurance policy for our household. And again, being super strategic, I didn't just say, I feel like I'm going to be self-employed and I want to do this and I'm just going to go do this. I put all the pieces in place. And I was probably close to 40 before it all started to gel together. So, there's opportunities in life that people are faced with in their 20s when they have nothing and they have nothing to lose. I was also now in my 30s going, I got mouths to feed. I've got a wife to support. I've got a future to pay for. And I don't want to be a 9-to-5er every day. I don't mind working at midnight. I just don't want to be chained to a desk. So I thought that real estate would be the place that I would go and I would sell and buy houses. And I thought a realtor would be a really cool job to have, except for I realized quickly that was weekend work, taking me away from my family. And I was also, again, had the opportunity to work with folks in corporate that I had worked with at Verizon. So I was like, unknown, known, right? Very strategic in my path to, do I want to go work in something I think is good and I know I can make some money at, or do I want to go back to those folks that I worked with at Verizon in a different capacity? And I chose that. As a result, Worldgate was formed, and Worldgate became a place for me to be a continual learner and to strategically get better at running a company, being an employer, and then also being a client to, or a vendor to my clients. And so I think there was a lot of transition in my late 30s, early 40s. And I think in the last 20 years, we've had a really nice run with the way that I pay attention to those things and offer myself the opportunity to be a continual learner and not a worker bee. Very different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you mentioned about having mentors. I know for me, I have mentors. Mentors seem to flow into my life for a period of time, maybe to help me get to the next step, or maybe, help me really think through something that I've been struggling with
Mm-hmm.
and then leave. But you've had the same mentor coach for 12 years. How did you find yourself surrounded by these great people? Do you go to conferences? Do you go to like coaching parties? How do you find these great people to help you on that strategic path?
You should say that. I go on my gut, and I will say that my coach, who I met in 2006, was my client when I was trying to be a realtor. So I literally sold their condo. And as I was transitioning from being a realtor to Worldgate and sort of working through what I wanted to do there, they were finishing up their certification at Georgetown as leadership coaches. And in the process of selling their house, trust became a factor in our relationship. There was a dynamic where we were able to work together. I was able to learn. They were able to learn. They were teaching. They had experience. And I didn't have much of a system of mentors. So I went in. I opened up the veil and I gave it an opportunity. And I'll be having a coaching call next week and how I'm going to present myself at my next speaking engagement, because they have a different perspective and they have a different way of making sure I don't talk about just my book, but maybe what my book means. That coach is also the same person who trains and supports my staff. And so we have work sessions, work seminars. It's very serendipitous, if you will, that we work together. It's not about conferences. It's not about one-offs. It's about relationships. And so, I've had some pretty big traumas in my life, and these people are still there for those on the human side, on the personal side, as well as on the business side, and bringing their experience. And I pay for that experience. It's not free. So, we have a nice dance that hits a lot of different quadrants. It's one thing to say, oh, I've got a coach. He's been great. It's been 12 years. I talk about how that relationship has trajected my business, has trajected my personal relationships, how I've paid her to deliver for me things that will make my client's experience better as well. So it's very intertwined. It's not just a one-off. I didn't come from a scholarly background. I didn't come into this world thinking, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. But what I did end up doing successfully is building a stable or a barn of folks who I feel in relationship with, who have helped me pay the bills, if you will, in a positive way. Maybe it's not just about working 9 to 5. Maybe it's about actually showing some empathy and some compassion in both the people that work for me and the people I work for. And so it's really about self-reflection, continuous learning, communication, relationships, partnerships. Those things to me are never changing. Maybe how you do them improve, but whether or not I know how to implement a UKG system, that'll be foreign in 10 years. The relationships that I have now implementing those systems should be the same people at my funeral.
I think that's a really good point. It's about getting it done, getting the project done, getting on to the next project, getting the next A, getting the next accolade. And not always about taking time to be, I'm going to say, present in the present, to look at all those lessons that you're learning along the way, to look at relationships, who resonates with you, who doesn't resonate with you, who's a challenge to work with, who's not a challenge to work with. And you don't necessarily really pay attention to all those life lessons. And it's amazing how many of us, when we get older, obviously I'm 29 always, but as we get older, we start reflecting back. I just did a 15-year review. to see what I was calling back in my life that wasn't working for me and didn't make me happy. And if you have a really good mentor or coach or
Mm-hmm.
sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
they'll tell you the good, bad, and ugly, and they'll hold you accountable for.
Mm-hmm.
How have you found then having all these backgrounds and having people hold you accountable? Have you seen your core leadership principles? Have they changed over the years? Have your priorities changed? How you relate to other people changed over the years because of that?
I wouldn't say that it's changed. I've always started with the desire to be connected to people. I would say that I have improved it as a result of the support of others. I'm quicker to adjust and recalibrate approach to things, maybe a little more compassionate, maybe a little bit more interested in something about what's going on with them versus the bottom line. And that's a continual learning curve for me because of the impacts they're facing constantly changing also. So for me, it's probably not that I've changed, it's that I'm hopefully getting better at all those things you just mentioned.
How do you go about even determining where your next focus should be? I know a lot of times we get so many different things coming at us. It's really hard to find what is going to be your top priority. I know when I work for companies, they'll have 20 different things they need to get done. And I'm like, you can't focus on 20 things at one time. You can't multitask. You only can focus on one thing at a time. How do you go about determining that? How do you go ahead and suggest to other people try to go ahead and figure out what they should be even doing on a minute by minute basis, not only for themselves and their family, but maybe for their business? I think that's the reason why we have a lot of people, a lot of anxiety and strife right now. They're bombarded with so many things.
I think what you're talking about, I wouldn't be able to give prescription for because so many businesses are so different in how they respond to things and how quickly they may or may not be able to respond to things. So for me, what comes up in that inquiry is it's about habits. It's about me working at peak performance. It's about me being self-aware, your listeners being self-aware of what they can handle and at what pace, and giving themselves a little time out, if you will, for a little self-care. So I manage my life through a calendar and through a lot of repetition. I get up, I work out, I make my bed, I take a shower, I go to work, and suddenly it's 9:30 and I've done the same thing every day and the pattern is complete and I'm ready for what comes to my door. And so I can't predict what that'll be, but I can say I'm ready for it because of the habits I brought to my own sort of personal interaction with the world. I also have certain goals that I've set up in my life that I want to achieve. And so while I have to meet the objectives through good habits of getting to those goals, if I find what keeps showing up at my door is not aligned, then eventually I'm going to change that. And that self-awareness is what I would call continuous learning. And so, it's funny because there's a couple things I've done in this life that I'm like, oh, wow, that was a big waste of time. I've kept employees longer than I should have. I've actually engaged in negative behavior to move things along so that, I thought I was doing the right thing. And really what I found is at the end of the day, if I had just handled it in the peak performance way that I could have in the beginning, it would have been a lot quicker and a lot easier to solve the problem for everyone. And now in hindsight, it's always 2020. But I apply those things and I try and make them better. So when you say what's changed over the years is the application of those sort of situations. I don't let things linger as long now, for example.
Time back with employees about knowing when maybe you keep them too long, when you don't give them a chance. I think people struggle with that as well too. I tell people, if you have a stellar employee who all of a sudden is not a stellar employee, something's happening. And a lot of times people only look at their performance at work, but there could be handling a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And sometimes having that grace on, do they need some time off? Do they need extra resources, EAP or anything like that to help them with a family member who might be having some physical problem? Maybe having that 3 months of grace and support actually has an employee for 8 years. And a lot of times it seems like companies want to be like, you performed yesterday, but not today. Therefore, you're on the layoff list tomorrow. Is that what you see too? And how you advise people?
I'm definitely a visionary as a leader and as a person. So I'm always 3 months ahead of whatever's happening for sure. So, you bring up a very valid point around how we handle our employees. I went to Fordham University to speak to a class of graduates. And one of the students said to me, I read through your book and I understand about relationships, but I always thought business was business and family was family. And I was a little taken back by that. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I've never actually done that. I've always blended them, and it's always been familial business. I don't actually want to work with people that are going to be static and sterile as a preference. I'll do it. And in some cases, you need the guys to, fix the plumbing. But, I think when I'm in business with someone, it's got to be more familial. And I said to them, that's really within how you decide what level of familial you want to bring to the table. In my company, I have an open door policy. If you're willing to share, I'm willing to support is the model. Like that's where, if you walk in my door and you tell me the examples for the ones you just gave, I am going to give you some time and some space. And I am going to ask you what it is I can offer you. And I am going to create a boundary between what's appropriate legally as an employer and what might be better for you to figure out on your own versus what you bring to my table. So it's an interesting line that is more in the instances than it is in the concept. So I kind of try to explain that to the student, but as an employee has walked in here, I've actually prepaid employee salaries a couple of weeks in advance. And I then actually leveled that out by taking half of their payback over the course of 6 months if I gave them a 3-month advance. And that is surprisingly unheard of in a lot of business. Surprisingly unheard of. And for me, it's not even you came to work here is the first olive branch to us having a relationship. Not I hired you. Think about that. And so it's really, we're the Washington Post 2022 Employer of the Year, some fancy award. Inc. magazine recognized us on these employee survey awards. Worldgate is recognized on other platforms for things that we do for our employees. We train them, we loan them money if they need to, we give them time off if we need to, and more than anything, we are straight up with them. Here are the boundaries, here are the parameters, here's the handbook. But if you need help with it, let's talk about it. And if it needs to change, let's work on that. If you can start with compassion as a leader, your company will thrive.
Yeah, there's a misnomer out there. I know a lot of companies who I get attracted to by able to work with them is I look at their website, I look to see what they've said on talk shows, I look to see what's in print. I look and they talk about transformation and their vision and their mission. And then when I speak with them and then I'm talking back to them because that resonated with me because that's who I am as a core, they're like, what are you even talking about? And I'm like, you wrote this yesterday or it's on your website. And that's the thing. When you're putting yourself out there, you're your personal brand. When you put the company out there, you're a company brand. And where people get disgruntled very quickly is when that's not.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? My wife is the president of Worldgate. So we've actually over the years collaborated in a way that even my personal relationships are across the hall in the president's office. And so we bring that here. I think the best way to describe it kind of goes back to the habits thing. It's kind of like how do you manage a hectic schedule? I think you were talking about earlier. And it's really how do you manage yourself to manage the hecticity of the schedule you've chosen? One of the things that we've done recently that's really proven to be beneficial to that compassion is we've implemented a monthly feedback between leadership and employees. And every month, the employees are to meet with their leadership, their managers, if you will, and for 15 minutes, talk about where they're at and are things going satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and what are your goals? These used to be the annual evaluations where everybody sat down and had to spend hours and days and all kinds of time trying to figure things out and reflect on things that had already passed. We don't do those anymore. We talk monthly and we piggyback from where we left off on how things are going. And I think the employees and the leadership are really appreciating that because it creates, like I was saying earlier about habits, that subfloor of process that requires the compassion. What we do drives us to improve our communication, drives us to improve our feedback, drives us to improve on how we're working together and how we're bringing human to the table versus just saying it in print or just trying to say it and then never executing on it. So we try and do those things that bring us to peak performance in ourselves and in our company. We try and get better every day. We bring in new perspectives. Some of my employees have been insubordinate. Some of my employees have been reprimanded, been written up. They've got the process of termination headed their way. And instead, we said, hey, maybe you need some coaching. Maybe you need to take this outside of the office. We've provided several employees hours and hours of coaching to help them improve on their performance. And it works, to your point. Your stellar employee not being stellar anymore is likely due to something that needs to be worked through. And I've also had stellar employees that have said, I want to take it somewhere else and I'm leaving. But if you're invested, I'm invested. Being present to those and aware of those and coaching yourselves to be in those spots of compassion and presence is really what it's about. It's really what it's about, because the instances are constantly going to change. UKG implementations are going to become something else, but the relationships will all be the same. And if you can honor those and be your best self in those, you are going to get the best delivery out of someone, and vice versa. Give the best delivery for someone.
I totally agree with that. I tell people, if I put you on a performance improvement plan, that's what HR calls it. What I call is you and I need to get aligned on this project. And I know you're struggling and I'm struggling because together we're not getting it together. So I'm failing and you're failing. So
Right.
What do we need to write out as a project plan? Your dues, my dues, us meeting dues together. So you and I can learn how to work very efficiently as a team and knock it out of the park. So I tell people, and I think I've only had one that time where it was a PIP where a person didn't decide to move on, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm all in. And I would tell you, I was so more all in than they were.
Yeah, and I think also for me, it's about intention and it's about how you're going to be working together more than it is the deliverable. And I found that even with my clients who are paying bills, who are saying, we need your services. I will be willing to bet that if people understood this, they would recognize that their clients are maybe paying more for the partnership than they are the tactical stuff. And people miss that boat, I think. And I think, I've had premier school districts call me and say, we really appreciated how you brought to the table a perspective of partnership that no other vendor who had stronger skill set than your guys. But we're still going with you. There's money in this. There is what I call success. And if people are happy, they're getting all the boxes checked.
And that really ties into really from the very beginning when you talk about communication. And communication is not just me talking and you playing in your head what you're going to say back, but trying to listen to the words that I'm saying and try to really understand them. So then we can be impactful together, because that definitely helps with kids. That definitely helps with clients. And it helps you as a mentor and coach.
Well, that's continuous learning for me. And I'm a talk to think person. So I'm an extroverted. I talk to think to process. So I'm actually listening to you, even though I might be talking, in what your body language is, how we're communicating, what I see as your aura. And I do my best to shut my mouth and stop talking to think. And I'm on a continual improvement process with that. But I'll tell anyone, if I'm talking, I'm still observing. And it's, all part of my ADD. I can do it all. It's my curse and gift all in one. But I think it's important because the intention is there for us to be, and one of my clients said this to me perfectly. No one is ill-intended. And ill intention comes as a reaction. But if you always assume no one's ill-intended, 99% of the time they're not. And you can move forward, especially in business. You've hired them. They're your employers. They're on your team. Your client has hired you. You're their vendor. You're helping them. Why would I be ill-intended? And so a lot of times people come in hot because they just assume ill intention.
What do you suggest of people who want to move forward in a path, but they're not sure how to start? I know for me, myself, I went back and I looked at 15 years worth of papers, calendars, things like that, and to see what wasn't resonating with me anymore. And then I looked to see where I was spending my time, and was that time efficient? And was I really just spinning my wheels to spinning my wheels? How would you suggest people move forward who really want a better tomorrow than I had today? And I definitely want a better next year than this year.
So for me, the first thing I would suggest in people that are trying to just start out of the gate is get some rigor to what you're doing day to day. I have been so adamant about how I wake up, I go to the gym, I brush my teeth, take my shower, I get my clothes on, just like everybody else. I go to the office and I'm here at 8:15 and I'm ready to go. Some days I'm at 8, some days I'm at 8:30. That's success to me. I'm not tied to a calendar. But my daughter can't find her way past the bathroom to go in there to brush her teeth. And my son's room is a complete disaster and his bed is never made. And there's a trajectory or something that happens as a result of that. And we've all heard the military guy talk about make your bed. It's the first success you have of the day, but that's the thing I'm trying to describe in my habits. I'm prepared to be working at peak performance. So my first objective for folks trying to make a change is maybe look at what you're doing to prepare yourself for the challenges ahead. My second thing on that would be, don't think you're working for anyone. Think about working with everyone who's responsive. It's really important. I've had really senior executives come in here and try and tell me how to run my company. Instead, I've said, hey, why don't we try and figure out a better way to work together, right? With each other. And it works when they let their guard down and they don't think they have to come in here like the stallion of the stable and tell us how to do everything because we've hired them to be impactful. They're usually surprised. Let your guard down, let your shoulders drop, and let's get this done. Because I hired the experience, the concept, the aura, and the person, not the skill set. The skill sets always last for me for some reason. And I think it really is something to consider when people are trying to make that change. Who are you working with and at what level is your performance? Goals, habits, how are you communicating? Who are you in relationship with? And never, ever start anything without it being started before you start it. You're not just going to one day open up a door and create a business. Vet it out. I didn't open up Worldgate without realizing there are some people out there that will likely hire for me. There was risk. They might not have, but they did. And then I treated them like I was working with them. And I am still with them today, 25 years later. And I'm successful. I'm happy. I'm not chained to a desk. That's my success.
It's important. I think one of the things that when we forget about what it is that really drives us as an individual at our core internally, we're alike. It's very rare that we're not alike. If you really
and we're intended, and we're not ill-intended. If we're so alike, do you really believe we're ill-intended? And I think that's
I don't want to be around you if you're ill-intended then.
Exactly. And I think that's something that we don't say out loud to ourselves enough. We have to be on the defensive. We have to be super smart. You know, I went back and got my college degree 2 years ago. You know what my kids said to me? I have less flex now because I'm educated as a business owner. I had more flex when I didn't have my degree. You know why I did my degree? I was bored. I needed a hobby. I needed something to fulfill me. And I shopped and aligned with the college that I graduated from, the humanities degree I wanted. And they worked closely with me. And we partnered in my relationship in education as an adult. So I apply this not only to my business, but to my relationships, my friendships, and these outside hobbies and interests that I have.
Fortunately, our time has totally run short, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to the show. In the description, you'll find all of the information to contact Scott, and I'll put a link to his book. Please go ahead and subscribe to the Soulful CXO Insights newsletter if you haven't already done that. Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.